A thin line of snow scrolled past the window like static on a screen. Detroit held its breath in late winter, the air needle-sharp, the streets washed in that gray-white common to old televisions left on mute. In a small apartment above a shuttered pawnshop on Cass, a woman stood ankle-deep in cardboard boxes and read the past the way a projectionist reads the margins of a film, looking for grease, dates, fingerprints that tell you how to proceed without breaking anything. Her name was Nora Hale, and the room smelled like cold dust and magnetic tape. She had postponed the sorting for months, the ritual her mother's death required, the cataloging of a life into what stays and what doesn't. The boxes came from a storage locker whose key was found in a coat pocket that also contained a shopping list and a movie stub from a theater that had long ago given up pretending. There were paper sleeves of Super 8 reels, brittle as old leaves. There were high 8 cassettes with hand-drawn labels in a careful, tilted cursive that used to correct her homework. And there was a single VHS tape with nothing written on it, heavy in the hand like a worry stone, its windows showing a coil of brown memory. Nora worked as a film restorer at the last lab in the city, still willing to entertain the obsolete. She spent her days undoing mildew and heartbreak, coaxing images out of emulsions rotted by basements and summers. She knew the smell of acetate vinegar the way a baker knows yeast. At night she listened to the hum in the walls and told herself it was heat, not loneliness, not a question she kept finding a way not to ask. She had grown up on the edges of production rooms that felt like chapels, where her mother had been a color timer and then a fixer of other people's images. There had always been a camera on a shelf and a calendar that never agreed with the month. What there had not been was explanation. The unlabeled tape asked for a machine older than sense. Her workbench had one, a black, square-shouldered VCR that wore its scratches like service stripes. She slid the cassette in. The machine inhaled and the apartment filled with the soft machinery of decades ago. The TV screen woke with snow and then found the horizontal hold the way a person finds their footing on ice. It began as a city with no people. The view wobbled as if held in a cold hand. The camera slid past chain-link fences and salt-white streets lined with factories made of broken teeth. The Packard plant's ribs appeared, then a cut to Michigan Central Station, windows black like missing frames. Every few seconds the tape jumped, a stutter that felt less like damage and more like hesitation. The color was iron and bruise, the kind of palette that made breath look visible. Then, over the image, a blue line appeared, hand-drawn, a map layered onto the footage, as if someone had taken a felt-tip pen directly to the glass and insisted that the world needed instructions. The line began at a block of buildings that looked like a jaw and crossed the frame in a certain slant familiar to anyone who has lived in a grid city. The ink had the slight bloom of cheap marker used on a damp day. Little notations surfaced, arrows, circles, X marks that felt half sure of themselves. It was not a street map so much as a memory of one. As the tape rolled, the camera moved, and the blue line moved with it, the two in concert like choreography rehearsed in an empty room. At the bottom edge of the screen, a timestamp flickered in block numbers that made no calendar sense, as if the machine did not quite believe in time. The shot held on an alley whose bricks wore the city's original red under graffitied sermons. The blue X pulsed once. The frame shivered. The sound, thin, between channels, carried wind and a low hum like an elevator settling in its shaft. Nora noticed the pulsing first as a rhythm and then as a wordless summons. She leaned closer and watched the X widen to a circle and then dissolve back into a cross. The frame cut. The map redrew itself. The route advanced. It felt less like watching and more like being addressed. She thought of the nights she had stood beside her mother as reels threaded, the way her mother's hand tapped beats on the bench when making a difficult splice. The line on the screen had that same insistence. The tape ended not with credits, but with a flare of light and a smear of color like a breath on glass. There was, in that last smear, the shape of a face only if a person wanted to see it. The machine clicked, the screen fell back into snow, and the room remembered its small noises. Nora stood there until her calves ached and her fingers found the notch in the tape's shell as if to confirm that it was still a thing of plastic and not a trap set by grief. She rewound, replayed, and this time noticed the tiny anchor points where the map met the city, corners she knew, corridors she didn't. She fished out the paper atlas she kept for the romance of it, and traced the blue line with a pencil, until she had something like a path. Then she dressed for weather and left the apartment, locking the door the way you lock a room you intend to come back to but not yet. The first mark on the map translated into a block of warehouses near the decaying cut, their doors shuttered, their names painted over in squares of municipal forgetfulness. The air tasted of old rain and cardboard. An icicle snapped somewhere close by and performed the sound of brittle honesty. Nora stood at the mouth of the alley as it appeared on the tape, her body echoing the posture of the camera, and waited for a feeling to tell her whether she was ridiculous. Nothing dramatic happened. A truck passed with a moan. A pigeon considered and then remained undecided. She felt, at most, not alone. She took a photograph not for proof but to tether herself to the present. Then she walked to the next coordinate. The day arranged itself around her like a long hallway. She passed windows with televisions tuned to channels that sold someone else's afternoon. The city was a museum of materials: brick, steel, glass, the ghost of wood under paint. She followed the pencil line on her folded map as if it were attached to her ribs. At each location the world behaved. It offered rust, snow, some microdrama of traffic. But as she accumulated these ordinary places, a pressure built behind her eyes, a sense that she was being braided with something that did not care for linearity. Memory is not a street and does not love maps, and yet she felt mapped. By the time she reached the River Rouge, the light had thinned into the kind of gray that asks headlights to lie. The blue line on the tape had drawn a curve here, across a footbridge whose grating sang like a cheap instrument. She crossed the bridge and felt a small static pulse climb from the rails into her palms through her gloves, a trivial shock that lifted the hairs along her wrists. On the tape, this was where the map had pulsed the first time. She had thought it was a video artifact. Standing there, it felt like an instruction being honored by a place. She returned home with her cheeks raw and her feet arguing quietly with her. The tape ate the machine again, and she watched with a restorer's patience, finding what she had missed. The route she had taken was not just a route, it was a loop. The line doubled back in ways that suggested a geometry under the city's geometry. The loop terminated at a building she knew only by rumor, the Riverside Film Research Annex, a studio condemned the year her mother had taken a job no one would describe at dinner. The footage lingered on its shuttered facade as a stray snowflake forced the autofocus to soften everything for a heartbeat. Then the screen flared and went to black. On the cassette's spine, under the dust, she noticed something she had missed, the faintest ridge of dried adhesive. A label had once lived here and been peeled away cleanly. In her mother's desk, Nora found an index card folded twice, the paper thinned along the creases. 4 words in that careful tilt. VHS is a transfer. The relief rang through her like heat. The map was not the original. It had been copied onto tape to survive the rot that chews at 16 millimeters. The tape was a key left for a future, a rough copy her mother trusted to outlast a failed reel. In the days that followed, Nora balanced on the edge where skepticism and belief shake hands and tell everyone they've never met. She went to work, unpeeled mold from old films, and watched other people's dead have their faces returned. She ate standing up, because chairs surrendered too much to thought. She slept between episodes of faint sound she could not name. She played the tape in segments and, after each segment, went out into the city and placed her body where the footage had placed its lens. The act changed her gait. By the 3rd day she was walking like a steady operator, measuring drift by breath, anticipating the world as if it were a shot list. At some stops there were small anomalies. A stoplight flickered an extra beat before committing to red, as if reconsidering. A street sign spelled its own name wrong for a moment, and then corrected itself. These were probably nothing, and yet she recognized a signature known only to people who have spliced film under bad light. The telltale of a cut otherwise invisible, a rhythm slightly off, a heartbeat that has learned a new sync. Her earliest memory of her mother was not a face but a sound, the tight zip of a tape being pulled, the click of a leader into a core. Nora remembered sleeping under a table while that sound surrounded her like weather. Her mother had been economical with explanations, generous with presents. When Nora had asked why they moved so often, there had been a shrug that seemed to believe in momentum as truth. When Nora had asked who filmed the home movies no one played, her mother had changed the subject to light. The loop made sense finally as something intentional. Riverside was the terminus and the origin, the head and the tail of a snake that had learned to eat itself cleanly. On a Saturday afternoon that felt like the inside of a refrigerator, Nora climbed the chain-link fence marked with a sign that said nothing anymore. She walked across a courtyard where weeds had chosen symmetry over hope. The annex had a roll-up door rusted in place, a set of office windows taped into a cross from some storm 10 years ago, and a loading dock that remembered boots. Inside was the color of dust that has forgotten sunlight. The air carried the panicked sweetness of old wood. She moved along hallways that had hosted people who believed editing could change the world if you did it hard enough and long enough. Equipment lay under tarps like animals that sleep through winters. A darkroom exhaled the thinnest ghost of Fixer and something else, cardamom maybe, or the memory of a holiday. She began to recognize the place the way one recognizes a face they have only seen in photographs. She felt foolish and then did not. The screening room had no seats. It had a wall with a rectangle lighter than the wall around it, the echo of a screen removed in a hurry. A projector the size of a stubborn dog sat on a cart whose wheels had melted into flat ovals. Beside it, a stack of metal film cans waited as if patience were a religion. Each canister wore a number, and each number had been written by a hand she could see even with her eyes closed. She opened one reel with the tenderness of a surgeon. The film inside was crisp where it should have been brittle, a preservation that hinted at unnatural care. She fed the leader through the projector's gate and turned the knob with the reverence of a person kneeling. The bulb shocked itself awake. The wall, unadorned and unworthy, accepted the image. It was her street, years earlier, or years later. The specific date refused to be obedient. There was her building with its reluctant stairs. There was a plant on her sill she had not bought yet. There was a person moving in the edge of the frame, their shape familiar in the same way a vowel is familiar. The camera panned, amateur at first, and then sure of itself. It found Nora at a window, looking out at a day that had not occurred. She stood watching herself watch. The sensation was not vertigo. It was a new thing that made the inside of her ears heat. She raised a hand because the woman in the frame raised a hand because she raised a hand. She did not cry. The moment did not permit tears. It asked for attention paid in full. She threaded the next reel. A factory lot appeared, swarmed by gulls that do not mind decrepitude. The blue line from the VHS, the marker, the map, rose into the projected image, not as ink but as a light that believed itself to be ink. It traced the same path across the wall that it had traced across the television. She stood in Riverside's dead heart, and realized she was inside a machine that had learned how to convince the present to follow a cue. On the table she found a binder fat with indecency. Inside were notes, written in the same careful tilt that had once labeled school lunches. The handwriting described experiments with timing and attention, with the idea that analog film could be entrained by human focus, coaxed to record potential moments of consciousness, not prediction, not prophecy, but fragments of unborn perception that would later resonate when the subject lived them. The binder used words like echo state and memory field and reciprocation. A margin note circled twice. The film doesn't see the future, it carries the possibility of a future, then persuades the subject to align. The last section carried a warning underlined twice. Living subjects should not be exposed to prolonged reciprocation between projected image and embodied action, as the feedback might saturate presentness until presentness tore. There was a final note, written with less discipline, as if the hand had been asked to write while the body did something else. The note asked for forgiveness from no one in particular. It did not apologize for science. It apologized for love misapplied to it. Tucked behind the last page, a thin card. VHS is a transfer for her. If the reels rot, the route remains. She returned to the apartment with the tapes under her coat like contraband breath. Snow tattled against the window all night. She played the VHS again to see if it would confess. When the blue map pulsed at the annex door, the television's frame bowed as if inhaling. The room's temperature stepped down. The smell of fixer, impossible in a place without a tray or a sink, visited and left like a neighbor. On the screen, the image flared and flattened into black as before. But now, in the reflection of the glass, in the thin double exposure that is every watcher's face at midnight, she saw the suggestion of her mother's profile aligned with her own. The days that followed were unhelpful to the idea of waking. She went to the annex in the mornings and ran the reels in stricter sequence. She visited the marked sites in the afternoons and placed herself where the camera had wanted her. People around her moved as if they had been filmed already and were only now being projected. Small things disobeyed. A bus's route number flirted with different digits. A poster's image resolved into a different actor. The city did not conspire, it cooperated dumbly. Reality becomes lazy when offered reproduction as an alternative. At the edges of these returns, Nora felt something eroding in her conviction that she was making choices. She told herself that choice is often a story we tell to produce a tolerable edit. She responded to the tape's cues as if to an old friend's texts, with guilt, with joy, with suspicion of her motives. The experiment in the binder had described loop closure as both necessary and catastrophic. The loop's completion stabilized the subject in a particular narrative, and risked leaving them there as if pinned by a collector. She could stop. She could destroy the tape and the reels and turn the annex back into a room and her apartment back into a room and accept that a life without explanation may be kinder than one over-explained. She could love her mother in the past tense only. She could fail to be interesting. Instead, on a Wednesday that refused to commit to sunlight, she carried the VHS to the annex, threaded it into a VCR older than some of the mold on the walls, and pointed its output to the projector's input, a mouth feeding another mouth. She knew better than to cross systems this way. She also knew that the binder had predicted exactly that she would. The machine stack muttered to itself. The projector's fan sounded like an animal remembering a run. On the wall the city assembled, blue line on top like a conductor. The loop began to close. The footage walked her to herself. In the second reel she saw herself in yesterday's coat at the footbridge over the river. In the third she saw herself in the annex threading the first reel. In the fourth the hospital room returned and lengthened until she had to accept that it was the day her mother had taken her home, a bundle of bone and conjecture, and placed her beside a window to see whether light would accept her. A camera on a tripod faced the crib with professional patience. A note beside the lens pleaded with the future to be kind. The image reached the moment she was now, standing before a wall where a loop was completing. The air in the room took on the thickness of baths too hot. The map flared with an intensity that made blue into a kind of sound. At the edge of her vision, things wavered: pipes, hairs, the names of objects. She stepped forward because the woman on the wall stepped forward because she stepped forward. The projector thrummed. The floor discovered a new creak under her left foot. Somewhere in the building, a door persuaded itself to be closed. The last frames of the tape were not violent. They offered a simple proposition: if she kept watching, the difference between the projection and the room would resolve into nothing. She would be image and image would be her. The loop would become a place to live, frictionless, without interruption. The binder had called this saturation. It had implied that few subjects returned from it unchanged. It had not described those changes except to say they were irreversible, and possibly more akin to reclassification than to harm. Nora did not believe in rescue by fire. She did not believe in leaving things unexamined to preserve the illusion that safety is holy. She believed in edits that left a seam. She believed in versions. She believed, perhaps because of her mother, that attention was the kind of love that could be both cure and weapon. She took the tape from the VCR while the projector still sang. Pain sprang like a spark. Static cracked across her knuckles. A fine iron taste bloomed at the back of her tongue. The cassette was warm in a way plastic has no right to be. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from recognition, from the intimate shock of touching the thing that had been touching her life. She held the cassette at the edge of the projection where the map's blue kissed plastic. The image wavered as if insulted. She weighed the tape like a coin to be spent. The loop would remain untied if she destroyed it. The loop would close if she played it out. Both options carried a crime against either memory or self. She set the tape on the projector cart and unreeled an inch, then two. The ribbon of tape caught the light and turned it into brown wine. Every tiny frame clicked against her skin like teeth. She thought of each window asked to look in two directions at once. She thought of her mother standing where she now stood, trusting a theory because theories are easier to trust than people. She pulled a few more inches. Her breathing shortened into metronome beats. She cut. The scissors made a sound like a syllable bitten off. She expected a collapse, a seizure in the machines, a scream of sprockets. Instead, the projector's hum dipped and steadied. The air reset. The low electrical stutter that had underridden the room for days went smooth, as if time had been persuaded back into one channel. Her wrist prickled, then calmed. The blue line on the wall thinned, and then consented to be only light. She did not join the ends. She left the cut honest. The cassette lay there like a heart taken out to ask it to answer. Light without instruction flooded the wall, beautiful, selfish, and finally indifferent. She waited for catastrophe and found only air. The annex settled, like a story deciding not to be told that way. Dust resumed its quiet descent. Pipes remembered their temperature. Outside, a truck downshifted with the tired grandeur of work continuing. She kept the reels. She placed the cut tape in a tin and labeled it with a date she did not verify. On the card she wrote 3 lines: transfer copy, experiment, potential consciousness, loop ended by choice. She locked the annex and climbed back into a city that had never promised coherence. The sky over Woodward was a dirty pearl. A bus shouted its route as if routes were declarations of principle. A child's mitten lay on the sidewalk, a perfect thing lost perfectly. In the week that followed, she tested the world for seams. She touched the street sign that had spelled itself wrong and found it obedient. She stood on the footbridge and felt only the reasonable sting of winter. At home she placed the tin on a shelf beside photographs that did not move. She dreamed less of rooms made of light and more of rooms made of rooms. She went to work and repaired other people's histories with care that felt both new and ancient. When a client brought a box of wedding footage that had been stored in a garage that converted summers into chemical acts of war, she extracted 2 minutes of vows from an hour of heartbreak and handed them back like surgery. She did not think of loops then. She thought of repair as a steady act. She wrote small explanations on invoices no one would read and felt useful in a way that did not require cosmologies. On a Sunday she walked to Belle Isle and watched ice make up its mind. The city's skyline arranged itself into an assertion. A gull used the wind to say something old. She placed her hand on the cold of the railing and practiced existing without a camera watching. It is an unfashionable skill and takes longer than you think. Of her mother she allowed a different story now, one that did not excuse or condemn but described with dignity. A woman who believed that film could be taught to carry more than images had taught it to carry a daughter too far, and then not far enough. Love had been the solvent, and the adhesive. The binder remained in her closet like a profanity against silence. She did not open it often. She open-handedly forgave less than she expected and more than was deserved, and discovered that forgiveness is neither arithmetic nor art, it is repetition. Some days she failed the practice. She repeated it anyway. Spring came in Detroit with a laugh that sounded like a cough. The annex received city funding disguised as mercy and was dismantled piece by men with the patience to remove the past without insulting it. Nora visited once and stood on the loading dock pretending she was not saying goodbye. She kept a single bulb from the projector's housing, a prosthetic star on her desk against precision without kindness. If the story had an ending, it happened in a way not unlike a cut placed in a scene so skillfully that the dream does not break. One evening in early summer, with the apartment's windows open to the tender arguments of traffic, the VHS machine she no longer used ejected the cut cassette on its own. The tape had crept an inch back into the world, buckling out like breath under a door. She watched the ribbon and did not touch it. She let it be an object again, not a portal, not a threat. She placed the cassette in a new box and wrote a note for whoever would find it after her. That memory is not a map and maps do not love us. But they can be kind if we do not ask them to be true. She turned off the lights and stood with the room. Darkness held and then loosened. The city took up its patient hum. Somewhere on Grand River a television argued with its own antenna. Somewhere in the Fisher Body ruins a fox considered a new route. Somewhere in a house she had never entered, someone threaded a film they did not yet know how to watch and promised themselves that this time they would not stand too close. There are objects that keep time for us after we abandon the clock. A ribbon of tape. A projector bulb. A key folded into an old pocket. We inherit these small metronomes and learn, if we are careful, to let them tick without asking them to lead. If this story lingered, let it do so quietly. Sit with a photograph you almost threw away. Walk a street that remembers you differently than you remember it. Let one unanswered question remain unanswered. If you felt something here, pass it forward, not as proof, but as a pause,